We continue now at the top of Daf Ayin Amud Aleph in Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 70a. And the previous Amud, the Gemara had just brought the second version of the Machlokas Rav and Shmuel in terms of an Arusa who became pregnant. In the second version, it said that if the husband admits that he had relations with the Arusa, so then we assume that the child came from him. There would be no Machlokas Rav and Shmuel. The only Machlokas Rav and Shmuel is, let's say we just find that the woman is pregnant, the husband doesn't say that it was from him, and so there Rav says the child is a mamzer, and there Shmuel says the child is a shtuki, meaning to say we don't know the lineage of the child, we don't know exactly who the father is. And now Rava explains what the Machlokas Rav and Shmuel is. And so Rava says if you have a situation where there's no rumor that it came from him, and there's a rumor that it came possibly from the outside, that's where Rav says that the child is a mamzer. But Rava continues, Aval dama minei, but if there are rumors that the child has come from the husband, that they had relations, afagav the daima me'alma, even if there are also rumors that this woman had relations with other people, so then the halacha would be basrei didei shadinan le. We assume that the child came from the husband. And the Gemara continues within this version, Amar Rava says, from where can I prove to you that this is true? I can prove it from our Mishnah. The Katani, because our Mishnah says, Yolda Tochal. The case over there again is, you have a woman who's a Yisraelis, and she has relations with a Kohen, and so the halacha over there is that if she gives birth to a child, again, the relations was not l'shem mishas, it wasn't for the purpose of marriage. If she gives birth to a child, Tochal, so then she can eat Truma on account of the child who came from the Kohen. And so now Rava analyzes the Mishnah. Hechidami, what exactly is the case over here in the Mishnah? If the case in the Mishnah is there are rumors that she had relations with him with the Kohen, but there's no rumors that she had relations with anyone else, so tzricha lemeimar detechel, does the Mishnah even need to tell us she can eat Truma? Of course she can eat Truma. The only person that the child is from is the Kohen. Elalav, rather is it not, the daimon nami me'alma, that the case is that there are rumors that she was with him, but there are also rumors she was with other people as well, and therefore this is exactly the case that we're talking about over here. And umah hasam de lahai yisura. Now, if over there in the Mishnah, where she's usher to everybody, it's a situation she's not having relations with a Kohen within the context of marriage. She's usher to everybody. And what do we say? Basri didei shadinanle. We assume that the child came from the Kohen, even though it's daima minei and daima me'alma. We assume the child came from the Kohen. So hachas over here as well. De lahai yisura lahai atayra. Here even more so. Over here where she's usher to everybody else, but she's mutter to the person that she's engaged to, that she's the arusa to. So they're lo kol shekain. So there certainly we should assume basrei didei shadinan, and that's exactly what Rav is saying. Rav is saying again, daima minei afagav the daima mi'alma. If there are rumors that it's from him, even though there are rumors from everybody, we would certainly say basrei didei shadinan le. That's what Rav is proving from the Mishnah. And so the Gemara continues, Amar le Abaya. So Abaya responded to Rav, and he says to him as follows, Liola me malach, really I could tell you as follows, Kol heicha de daima me'alma, anytime you have a situation where there are rumors that she was with other people, afagav de daima minei, even if there are rumors that she was with this individual, the husband here as well, Amar Rav havlad mamzer, still, the Rav would say that the child is a mamzer because there are rumors she was with other people. So if that's the case, so how come in our Mishnah, in the case of our Mishnah also, why don't we say the same thing? Why don't we say that since there are rumors that she's with other people, therefore we should assume that maybe this child's not from the Kohen? But the Gemara says very simply, Umas nisin b'delo daima klal. Our Mishnah, you can simply say the case is there were no rumors at all in any direction, and therefore since there were no rumors at all, so in that case the Mishnah says we assume it came from the Kohen. Rashi over here says, Umas nisin b'delo daima klal mekame hachalav minei v'lav me'alma. There were no rumors from him or from anyone else. Hilkach itzdarech lashmin, and that's what the Mishnah is teaching us. The tochal, that she's allowed to eat truma. The aminan b'hach bia nisabra. We assume that this bia that she had with the Kohen, that's when she became pregnant, and again, this child is from the Kohen. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, "Ha'eved posel mishum bia v'chulu." If you have an eved and he has relations with the woman, so that can passel her from truma, can passel her from kahuna. But let's say the woman has a descendant, has offspring that is an eved, so that child is not going to disqualify her from truma. Talking about, let's say, a situation where she's a kohenes, and then the descendant that she has is an eved through a Yisrael, so that's not going to disqualify her from truma. And the Gemara says, "My time, what's the reason?" Amar Krotz, because the pasuk says, "O isha vilodeo tiyev." Gomer, it says that the woman and her children will be to the master. What that means to say, a child that comes from a shifcha is considered to have lineage totally after the shifcha. That child does not go after the father at all, and therefore if you have a situation like this, where this kohenes, she has a grandson that is an eved, and that's through her son who was with the shifcha, that grandson is considered really only the child of the shifcha, and it doesn't disqualify her from truma. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Mamzer posel umachel. If you have a descendant that's a Mamzer, so then it can passel her from Truma. Again, let's say you have a situation where she is a Kohenes and she has to have no descendants from the Yisrael in order to eat Truma. So if one of those descendants is a Mamzer, that can passel her from Truma. And the other way around as well. Let's say the Mamzer is a descendant of hers through her marriage to the Kohen. Let's say she was a Bas Yisrael, so then she could eat Truma based on the descendant that's a descendant of hers, even though that descendant is a Mamzer, because it's a descendant through the Kohen. And so the Gemara now says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Vizera ein law, talking about a situation where the woman has no children, so then we say she goes back to her father's house and gets the Truma. So ein li ela zara, I only know the children. Zera zara minayin, what about if we're talking about grandchildren, does that also count? Talmud Lomar, it says, Vizera ein law, she has no children, mikol mokum in any way, meaning even if she has children, even if she has grandchildren, that is enough to say she doesn't go back to her father's house and she would not get Truma. And so the Gemara continues, Ainli ela zera kosher. I only know that's true if it's zera kosher. Zera pasel minayin. How do we know that it even counts if it's zera pasel? Let's say a mamzer. Talmud lomar vizera ein law. The pasuk says vizera ein law, and we learn from that ayin olah, that you look upon and you inspect any kind of child, even if it is zera pasel. Gemara says you just use the same pasuk for the exact same thing. Vo'apikse lezera zara. You just use that same pasuk for grandchildren. Now you're using it for zera pasel. And so the Gemara says, no, zera zara lo itzrichkra. Actually, grandchildren don't even need a pasuk. There's a general principle, b'nei bonim harein kebonim, that grandchildren are like children. Ki itztarich kra lezera pasel. So what's the pasuk needed for? It's needed for zera pasel. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Reish Lakish le Rabbi Yochanan. So Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, Kiman, who does the Mishnah follow? Ki Rabbi Akiva, it seems to follow the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Di Amar yesh mamzer mechayve lavin, because Rabbi Akiva is the one that says that you can become a mamzer if you just violate a lav, because the Mishnah said, by an Ovid Kochavim and an Evid, if they have relations with the Yisraelis, the child's a mamzer. Now that's not a situation of a chi of kares, and so therefore it seems to follow Rabbi Akiva that you can have a mamzer from chayve lavin. And the Gemara says, no, afilu temer Rabbanan. You could even say that our Mishnah follows the Rabbanan. Be'ovid kochavim v'evid modu. When it comes to relations with a non-Jew, or when it comes to relations with an Evid, even they would admit that the child could be a mamzer. T'chiyasa Rav Dimi Yomer Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi mishum Rabbeinu, because when Rav Dimi came, he said in the name of Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi, in the name of Rabbeinu, Ovid kochavim v'evid habal bas Yisrael havlad mamzer. That if you have a non-Jew, you have an Evid that has relations with a bas Yisrael, the child is a mamzer. And Rashi over here says, bonim harein kebonim beperak habal Yevamot. That's earlier in the Mesechet. It talks about the fact grandchildren are like children. Keman karev Yakiva masnisim dekatani ovid kochavim v'evid habal bas Yisrael havlad mamzer. The Mishnah says that if you have a non-Jew or an Evid with a bas Yisrael, the child is a mamzer. And so the Gemara said again, Mishum Rabbeinu, who is Rabbeinu? That's Rebbe, that's Rav Yudah Anasi. They said that v'afa gav d'shamina d'poligad Rabbi Akiva. Even though in general Rebbe argues on Rabbi Akiva, beperek Rabbi Gamliel damarein devarim halalu amurim elo l'divrei Rabbi Akiva v'leilo svirale. He doesn't agree with Rabbi Akiva that by chayvei lavin there's mamzerus. Afilu achi, nevertheless, b'ovid kochavim v'evid, when it comes to an ovid kochavim and an evid, moda he would admit, kedamar ba'acholetz ovid kochavim lo tischaten v'evid lo siya kadesha. That's what we say earlier on. We learned that out from drushes. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Kohen Gadol pa'amim sheposel. Sometimes you can have a situation where a woman can have a grandson that's the Kohen Gadol, and that actually stops her from having truma, because what ends up happening is she had a relationship with a Yisrael, and through that Yisrael she had this grandson that's a Kohen Gadol. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, sometimes the grandmother will say, Hareini kaparas, I will be an atonement, ben biti kuza, for the son of my daughter who's a kuza. Kuza means to say a small one, the small kli, meaning the one that's a mamzer. I'm happy about that child, shemachileni b'truma, because that child actually allows me to eat truma. You can have a situation like we said where her grandson is a mamzer, but that grandson came about through her relationship to a kohen and actually allows her to have truma. And so she says hareini kapara. She says I'm willing to be an atonement for him, meaning she's praising that. Ve'eni kaparas ben biti kada, but I am not a kapara for the son of my daughter who's the kada, the great one, meaning the Kohen Gadol, the great kli, sheposlani minat truma. I actually don't like that descendant, because that descendant doesn't allow me to have truma, exactly like we said, because in that case, that Kohen Gadol could have come from her relationship with a Yisrael. Rashi over here says kuza is a kli katan, katan, it's a small vessel, kilomar mamzer shu garua, meaning she's happy about her descendant that's a mamzer, even though it's garua, even though it's like a negative, because it helps read truma. But kada, kli chasha, but the big one, the important vessel, kilomar kohen gadol, meaning the kohen gadol, that one she might not like as much, because that descendant is causing that she doesn't eat truma. Hadron alach almana, we will return to you, parak almana. That is the end of the 7th parak of Mesechet Yevamos. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe, and please take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And we will now begin the 8th parak of Mesechet Yevamos. And the Mishnah says, Ha'oril v'chol atmeim, if you have a Kohen that's an oril that's not circumcised, or you have a Kohen that's tamei, lo yochlu b'truma, they cannot eat truma. But nisheyen v'yavdein, but their wives and their servants, yochlu b'truma, they can still eat truma. Petzuadaka, chroshivcha, let's say you have a petzuadaka, that's a Kohen who has crushed testicles. Chroshivcha is if his aver is cut off. Hein v'yavdein, they and their servants, yochlu, they can eat the truma. However, nisheyen, but their wives, lo yochlu, they cannot eat truma. And the Mishnah continues, let's say they didn't have relations from the time that he became a p'tzuadak or chroshivcha. So then the wives are allowed to eat truma. They're only not allowed to eat truma if they had relations with the Kohen when he was in that state. Otherwise, they can eat truma. And the Mishnah continues, ve'ezeo p'tzuadaka. What exactly is a p'tzuadaka? Kol sheniftu ha'beitzim shalo ve'afilo achas meyan. As long as the testicle is crushed, even one of them. Uchroshivcha, and what's a chroshivcha? Kol shenichras hagid. As long as the aver is cut off, but if from the atara, that is the top part of the aver, if there remains a part of that, even the smallest amount, kosher, then he's still considered kosher, is not considered a chroshivcha. And we'll take a look at Rashi over here. Ha'oril, what's an oril? Kohen shemesu echov machmas mila. You have a Kohen and his brothers died when they had bris milah, so he never got a bris milah because it was too dangerous. That's a Kohen oril. Neshayim ve'avdeim yochlu. So again, if the Kohen's an oril or tamei, so then the wives and the servants can still eat truma. Just because they're an oril or tamei doesn't mean they're not kohanim. It's just they themselves have something holding them back from having truma. And Rashi continues, Neshayim shall p'tzuadak or chroshivcha. If you have the wives of the p'tzuadak or the chroshivcha, lo yochlu, they can't have truma. Why? The shaviyua chalala b'viyasim, because they become chalala when they have relations with the husband. Sharei niva lala pasala, because she had relations with somebody who she's puzzled to. Vim lo yida, but if they didn't have relations, lo bala achrechin, there was no relations after the individual became a p'tzuadaka or chroshivcha. V'haisa nesua lo kodem lachen, she was married beforehand, but again they didn't have relations after that point in time. Then they can still eat truma. The wives can still have truma. And finally, the Mishnah said, "Vim nishtayer me'atara." If you have from the atara, from the crown of the aver, there's still a little bit left. It wasn't cut off from beyond that point. As Rashi explains, "Shenichras me'atara ve'elach." It was only cut. It was only severed from the atara and onward. So kosher. So then the Kohen is still considered kosher. That's not considered a chroshivcha. Dahasam bisra bialmu. That's just the flesh of the aver. Velo gid. That's not the main part of the aver. She'ein gid ela me'atara ve'elach letzara guf. The gid is only from what's called the atara and towards the body, not extending away from the body. What is the atara? The atara is the crown. It means the shuras basar hamakefes b'makom hamila. It means the little bit of flesh that surrounds at the area where the bris milah is given. That's that area begova at the height. V'shofea v'yored at sofa. It then kind of slants downward. So from the atara, again, away from the guf, if that area is severed, that's not a problem of chroshivcha. It's only a problem if it's from the atara towards the guf. And the Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in a brayso, Amar Rebbe Elazar says, Minayin lo'orel she'en ochel b'truma. How do we know that an orel is not allowed to eat truma? Nemar, because the pasuk says toshav v'sacher b'pesach. It uses the language of toshav and sacher by the korban pesach. V'nemar toshav v'sacher b'truma, and it uses the same language, the same words when it comes to eating truma. Ma toshav v'sacher amar b'pesach orel aser bo. Just like the toshav and sacher written by korban pesach, we know the halach is an orel is not allowed to have korban pesach. Av toshav v'sacher amar b'truma. So too when it says toshav and sacher by truma, orel aser bo, it means to say that the orel is forbidden to have truma. And the Gemara continues, the Brisa continues, Rabbi Akiva says, Eino tzarech, this pasuk is not needed. Because Hareyu Omer, because the pasuk already says, Ish Ish, l'rabo sa'arel. It says Ish Ish, and that comes to include even the arel, even the person who is uncircumcised. And Rashi over here says, Toshav v'Sachar b'Truma uses the word Toshav and Sachar by Truma, d'chsiv Toshav Kohen v'Sachar lo yochal kodesh. It's talking about the Toshav of the Kohen and the Sachar of the Kohen. That's referring to the Eved Ivri of the Kohen, talking about an Eved Ivri who has his ear pierced and is acquired until Yovel, and then the Eved Ivri who's just there for 6 years. It doesn't matter what kind of Eved Ivri. Pasuk is saying the Eved Ivri is not allowed to have Kodesh, is not allowed to have Truma. And again, it uses a similar language when it comes to the Korban Pesach. And so we learn out, just like an Orel can't have Korban Pesach, so to an Orel is not allowed to have Truma. And then the Gemara said, Rabbi Akiva says, you don't need that because it says, Ish Ish, Mizera Aaron Vutzarua Ozav L'Rabos Orel. That pasuk, Ish Ish, comes to include Orel, meaning to say, it includes Orel Kitame, meaning an Orel is just like someone who's Tameh, Eitzel Achilas Truma. Just like a Tameh can't have Truma, so to an Orel cannot have Truma. That's what we're learning from Ish Ish, the V'haikra Truma Ksiv. Because in this pasuk, it mentions Truma, T'chsiv Uvah Hashemish V'tar V'achar Yochal Min HaKadoshim. It says you're going to eat from Kodshim, V'hainu Truma. In that context of that pasuk, the word Kodshim means Truma, the Sagile B'harav Shemesh, because we're talking about somebody who, when the sun goes down, that is enough to allow the person to have it, meaning it's talking about Truma. That's a specific halacha by Truma. So again, Rabbi Akiva learns from Ish Ish. And the Gemara continues, Amar Mar, the master said, we just said in the Brisa above, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Nemar Toshav v'Sachar b'Pesach, it says Toshav and Sachar by Korban Pesach, V'nemar Toshav v'Sachar b'Truma, and he uses the same language by Truma. Ma Toshav v'Sachar Amar b'Pesach Orel Aser Bo, just like the Toshav and Sachar by Korban Pesach, the halacha by Korban Pesach is an uncircumcised is not allowed to have Korban Pesach, Orel can't have it. Af Toshav v'Sachar Amar b'Truma Orel Aser Bo, so too the Toshav and Sachar mentioned by Truma, and Orel is not allowed to have Truma. And so the Gemara now says mufna. It's got to be that these words are free to create a gzera shava, meaning they're extra. You don't really need them. The ilav mufna, because if they're not free words, ikal mifrach, you can always refute this gzera shava. The general principle is that if you have a situation of a gzera shava of words that really aren't extra, so then if there's any refutation logically to comparing the two cases, that can refute the gzera shava. How can we refute this gzera shava? We can say as follows: Ma'ala Pesach. What is unique about Korban Pesach? Shekein chayav and olav misham pigul v'nosar v'tamei. There's different halachas that apply to karbanos that don't apply to truma. You have halachas of pigul, nosar, tamei. Those halachas don't apply to truma, so that would mess up the gzeira shava. And so the Gemara says, La'ai afnuye mufna, the refutation is not a good refutation because indeed the words are extra. And the Gemara says, Hai mufna, so which one is extra? In other words, which toshav v'sachar is not really needed? Gemara says, Ida truma, if you're going to say the toshav and sachar written by truma is not needed, that's not true. Mitzrach tzrichi, it is needed. The Tanyas we learned in a brayso, so toshav zekana kinyan olam. The word toshav means you have an Eved Ivri that's acquired forever, meaning he had his ear pierced beyond the 6 years. And sachar zekana kinyan shanim, and a sachar refers to an Eved Ivri who's just acquired for 6 years. You need both words. And the Brisa says, V'yomer toshav al yomer sachar. Why not just say toshav and not sachar? V'ani yomer, and then I'll say as follows: Konei kinyan olam eino ochel. If somebody that's acquired forever can't eat truma, so konei kinyan shanim lo kol shekain. Certainly, if you have an Eved Ivri who's only for a few years, he certainly shouldn't be able to eat truma. Why do you need both? But the Gemara says, no, ilukain, if that was the case, hayisi omer, then I would have said, toshav zekonai kinyan shanim, that a toshav is somebody who's only acquired for the 6 years. I wouldn't know what the word toshav means. Aval konai kinyan olam ochel, but if it's a kinyan olam, maybe he does eat. So ba'sacher v'limen al toshav comes along the word sacher, and it teaches us what the word toshav means. Sha'af apisha konai kinyan olam, that even though he's acquired forever by the master, ein ochel, he's not allowed to eat truma. So we understand that toshav and sacher by truma is certainly not extra. Those words are needed. And the Gemara continues, Ela de Pesach mufni. Rather, it's the Toshav and Sachar that are written by Korban Pesach that are actually extra. Hai Toshav and Sachar de Kosav Rachman of Pesach Mainiu. First of all, when it says that a Toshav and Sachar cannot eat a Korban Pesach, what is that referring to? Inema Toshav and Sachar mamish. If it really means a Toshav and Sachar, meaning an Eved Ivri, Mishum dehavele Toshav and Sachar. If they're Pesach, you think that an Eved Ivri is going to be potter from Korban Pesach. V'kaimel and Gabe Truma. But we've already established by Truma the Lo Achel that if you have an Eved Ivri, let's say a Kohen has an Eved Ivri, that Eved Ivri is not allowed to eat Truma, meaning that Eved Ivri is considered a Jew in every respect and certainly should be Chayev in Korban Pesach. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Ayin Amud Beis.